All right, folks, welcome aboard. Today it looks like it's probably just the one and only Jason Simard and me, Todd Tramonte. Hopefully Brett will join us. He had a little family issue to attend to, and we're hoping he'll make it. But if he doesn't, that's okay, because Jason actually teed up a really great comment right before we got rolling, and started to kind of pick my brain a little bit, and then we just said, stop, let's hit record and share this with everybody. So Jason's reading a book that I've read that we really like, and starting to think about getting 2019 off to a very quick start. And so why don't you show him what you're reading, and then we'll take it from there.
All right. Well, if you don't know me, I'm Jason Simard. I run a team up here in Vancouver Island in Canada, and I, like many of you, am planning for 2019 right now and trying to focus on what's the most effective way to sort of move the yardsticks forward. I'm always a big fan of feeling like I'm moving in a forward direction. So I'm reading this book right now called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. And I'm about 70 pages into it, and I'm loving what I'm reading, and it's really like clicking with me, and I'm excited to finish the book, and I'm going to try and do that probably tonight. But basically what Todd and I were talking about is, have you read the book, Todd? And your answer was yes, you've read the book. And then you were talking about how you implemented it in your business. And so you were talking about how you have it in quarters. And so you'll use the principles of the 4 disciplines of execution, which really talks about your wildly important goals that you have, setting those, but then focusing on your actions to get there, and focusing on like really one goal that everybody can buy into, that everybody collectively gets into. And so basically, why don't you touch base on what you've done this year, what you were focused on with your team?
Yeah. So big picture, what we did is we focused the entire year, hyper-focused the first 3 quarters on creating what we call the active referral rate, or the rate of referrals while we have an active client during the process of the transaction. So we want, in a perfect scenario, every single client introduces you to your next client before closing and funding, or ratification, or whatever you call it in your state, right? So our goal, though, we felt was aggressive but reasonable, was 50%. So every other one would do that. And so we had the exact same goal every quarter. It was an annual focus, but we took a slightly different piece of it each quarter. So in the first quarter, we did, what do we need to do during our initial consultation when we sit down with the prospect to set the expectation that they would introduce us to somebody before closing and funding. The second quarter, we talked about the languaging and the patterns and the disciplines of asking throughout the transactional process. After we've already set the expectation, then how do we kind of circle back and follow through and ask on that? And then in the third quarter, we revisited some of those items, and then we talked about generating referrals from still active referral rate focus, but non-current clients, right? So planting the seeds so that when they become active clients, that's already an expectation. So we went through scripting and languaging. Go ahead.
I just want to stop you for a second and just so how did you guys come up with a goal?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that, because I kind of wanted to share it, but I didn't want to derail us. So the book walks you through kind of this wildly exciting, amazing goal, and the way it narrows it down is, what's the one thing that would be really the easiest thing to do that would not disrupt your daily activities that you're already committed to? There's already a lot of things you have to do. So without adding some monstrous new thing, what's the simplest thing that would still have the biggest impact, right? So it's like, where's the biggest lever? If we started doing one little simple thing, it would make the biggest difference. So for us, we do quarterly offsite training days, and we did this late the previous year and said, hey, for next year, what's the one simplest thing we could add that's not going to derail us from what we're already committed to do, that would have the biggest impact? And we went around with a couple of topics, and they were all sort of near referrals. And so I kind of clarified, what if we really focused on this active referral rate? And everybody was like, that's it. That's the thing. So we got total team buy-in on 100%. And then I sort of took that and chunked it into quarterly focus areas. And I was talking to Jason before we started recording on how we measured it, and how we did it isn't really all that important, other than to know that 4 Disciplines of Execution is the name of the book. And people that really practice it have become accustomed to calling it 4DX, 4 disciplines of execution. So our 4DX approach was our scoreboard was just on the whiteboard in the room where we do our team training and group meetings. And so every week, everyone on the team would report their numbers right before our weekly team training. And that's part of this is a weekly accountability meeting. And we would take about 15 minutes before our normal training just to say, what are your numbers? What did you commit to last week? How did you do? What are you committed to next week? And for example, one of the things we do in our initial consultation is a script that we call My Goal. And I'll go through it if you want, but basically it sets the expectation that part of our goal is that you would introduce me to at least one person that wants to buy or sell a home before I even give you the keys to your new house or before I even give you a huge check for the sale of your house. And so did you do that? That was one of 3 things that quarter. So if you had an initial consultation, you would report, hey, I was 3 for 3 or 2 for 3 or 1 for 3. There's 3 important things you need to do. My goal script was one of them. And so we instilled that as a habit, and we kept score and we tracked how well you did, and we saw the correlating benefits of that. And then the next quarter, we took another angle of the same goal and did that. And it was really impactful.
Your team came up with a goal collectively.
Mm-hmm.
They kept each other accountable.
Mm-hmm.
How did they do that? They through the whiteboard, and so it was there once
Yes.
a week?
So they knew every single week you're going to report your hard numbers. And then in between those, if they're in the same room together calling, it's like, hey, did you get your, did you do your 5, 6, 7? Did you do your My Goal? Did you ask? We call them ASKs. Did you get an ASK in?
And so the one thing you focused on in Q1, once you set the goal and you had a weekly tracking session that you guys would track on the board, you then basically just focused on the one thing, which is how to ask and set the foundation for the referral in your client meetings.
Yep.
So if I'm doing a market evaluation, I'm meeting with a potential buyer, at some point in there, you practice the conversation of, hey, by the time I hand you the keys to your new house, I would love for you to introduce me to at least one person that you know who I can help provide the same value.
Yeah, and it's a script we've had forever, but we really instilled it and directly tied it to this outcome we were looking for. And everyone on the team had a trackable metric, even if you weren't an outside sales agent. So during that time, my trackable metric was that I would train on those things at least twice a week. So that's where I would role play the scripts with them, or I would train on how and when that goes in the initial consultation.
What I love about that goal, Todd, is it's measurable.
Mm-hmm.
You have influence over that. Like that's something you have control over. You can, if you do that every single time, that's something you can control. So for them, it's a goal that they know they have control over. You weren't focused on the outcome. Right. You built a plan based on the activity.
Yep. And if you haven't gotten to that point of the book yet, it talks about lead indicators and lag indicators, And so if you read the book, it's straight out of the book. I will make one quick secondary book that goes really well with this. And the book is called The 12-Week Year. And really the main takeaway, if you're not going to read it, is to focus on the year 12 weeks at a time. Set quarterly goals. Annual goals can really mess with your head. They can get away from you. They can lead you to believe you have way too much time to get to it, or they can lead you to believe you've already blown it. There's no way you'll ever make it. The 12-week year points you towards a quarterly goal. And that's kind of what you and I were talking about before we hit record was you can have an annual goal. What I love about 40X and giving it a 90-day chunk is you can take 4 different approaches or 4 different pieces or 4 different skills or disciplines or whatever that all contribute to that one significant goal. Right. And it can be more exciting, more competitive, you can see success in shorter intervals, which is always good.
Question for you. I mean,
the
reality of it is we've all set business goals and, got excited about them and then they peter off after a few weeks. Right? That's a real thing that a lot of people struggle with. I'm sure you do. I do. You get excited about an idea and then we just don't stick to it. So how did you keep this going? How did you make sure that this happened? Because, it was such an important goal for your team.
So our team is probably, the feedback I get is that we're way more structured than just about any other team I'm familiar with, right? Now there's different kinds of structure and stuff, but our team's in the office every day. We huddle together at 8:30. we're in the same office every Thursday, 12 to 1:30, doing our team meeting, team training. Now we have a Fort Worth office. Sometimes they're Zoomed in or FaceTimed in or whatever. But the fact is, that's an expectation. We are together. So we use that time. And what we said is, hey, that's a 90-minute meeting. We're going to shave off the first 15 minutes for the scoreboard and accountability piece. But I knew my curriculum for the next 12 weeks, the next 90 days, those training meetings are going to be about concepts, scripts, consultative ideas, philosophy, strategies, reasoning behind things that lead to this goal. So the goal sets the curriculum, and then the structure provides the accountability. And then once you start to build momentum and see results, that's when the team begins to keep itself accountable and keep its own momentum in between those meetings when you're not on the scoreboard. And part of this I've learned from doing really poorly so many times, but even the thing you track or where you put your scoreboard matters. And the book gets into that too, but we've learned, like I said, we reported our numbers sort of like a batting average, or a quick stat sheet. Hey, I was 1 for 3. I was 2 for 3, whatever. And the reason for that is, even if you didn't do a great job of penciling that on a notepad, you can quickly stop and go, okay, I had 3 sit-down meetings this week, and okay, I was 8 for 9. Like, that's not that. You don't have to go back with a calculator to figure that out, So that's why and how. And even if your team didn't have that amount of structure, if you were going to implement 4DX, you're advised to do a weekly accountability. You could do a quick Skype call or a Zoom call or a conference line deal, or everyone leaves a voicemail at a certain time and then it gets posted to a scoreboard or whatever. But that's essential, that's essential, the tracking piece.
Quick 10-second break to tell you about our sponsor, Real Geeks. Todd, Brett, and Jason all use Real Geeks as their website, home search, and prospecting database. Check it out at realgeeks.com. Now, back to the show.
Don, how important do you figure it was to get the team to collectively come up with this versus you just setting it as the CEO, the boss, and saying what we're doing and passing it down? What was
I think it's essential. I mean, you can do that at times where the leader sets a goal and everybody buys in. But even in that scenario, when it's the most selfless goal setting, it's not the same. You can joke all you want about, is it your idea or is it her idea? Ha ha ha. But in the team element, a truly team, effort where people really gave their contributions. And like I said, the team had already come to the point where referrals was going to be the thing. And then I just sort of guided it and said, how do you guys feel about tracking it in this timeline and this context? And that's when they felt like this was our idea that Todd helped us cultivate. And I think that's always best. Now, there are times where, because of the momentum or the day or the attitude of the moment, the team may not get to where you want them to get. But more often than not, you're going to come up with way better than you would have come up with on your own by trusting your team members.
Yeah. I love the book. I mean, there was a section in the book where they talked about like NASA's goals prior to 1967 and how they had like this long list of all these initiatives.
Yeah.
And Kennedy came up with one goal, which is in 10 years, we're going to put him on the moon. That was the only goal that everybody had to focus on.
Yep.
And then it happened. And that was like another light bulb moment. Is like, if you focus on one thing, you'll get way better results. I mean, to think about like the innovation and how much buy-in people got, because it was really clear what the goal was.
Yep.
And people really worked towards that. And I've often thought about, okay, what made me successful in my real estate business? And it was because I was focused on one thing. Like, I was focused on prospecting.
Yep.
And that was like the only thing that I really focused on to get going out of the gates, was just that one thing. I had multiple sources of leads that were coming in, but I had one thing that I focused on every single day, and that's all I did. And I find too many people get maybe distracted with multiple things that they're trying to do. And really, I mean, it's as simple as it sounds. If you do focus your mind on one thing, and everything else is not a distraction, but you're clearly focused, amazing the results. So I don't know your thoughts on that, but
I was just going to ask you what would be the one thing you would focus on, and I pretty much knew the answer. In my coaching and consulting groups, the last couple of weeks on our group calls, I've been asking, okay, looking back on 2018, What do you wish you had done a little bit better? And then what do you think the most powerful lever will be in your business in 2019? If you got really, really, really good at just one thing, if you focused on one thing that you improved a ton on, and everybody had said one of two things, prospecting or time management. And then, I have a whole soapbox on how you can't manage time. You can only manage yourself. And most people want to manage themselves around time better to get more prospecting in. So it's pretty much prospecting, right? Like I said I would prospect and I got busy and I didn't do it. I got busy doing deals. I got sick. I got blah, blah, blah. And it came down to, I didn't make the calls. I didn't shake the hands. I didn't look people in the eye enough. And so
let's elaborate on that, because, I've gotten stuck in that. So, let's just pretend you're coaching me right now. So
Great.
You are actually coaching me right now. So obviously prospecting, I know prospecting is the most effective way to get any momentum is to just take action and prospect. That's pretty obvious. But I think people need that quantified more. Maybe they need that drilled down a little bit deeper. So what advice would you give to someone like me who maybe is frustrated at times because, certain members of the team aren't prospecting or doing the things that I know they need to do to be successful?
Yeah.
How would you help me help them?
So it's interesting because prospecting is like saying I'm a businessman. It's a really vague term, right? So what I always want to encourage people with is, listen, you're not going to take just anybody off the street and put them on a dialer with a headset 3 hours a day, hammering Vulcan or Mojo or whatever. There are some people that really shouldn't be doing that. So if you've got the right people with the right skill sets, willing and coachable, then, and I hoping that that's the case, then I would say, look, the name of the game is this. The philosophy needs to be, and you already know this, but sometimes we need to be reminded that I'm willing to do things I don't want to do at times so that I can get the things I want. Why are you doing it? What's your goal? What are you in this for? It's never money, by the way. We've talked about that before. It's never money. It's what money can get you. It's never the Ferrari. It's what the Ferrari can get you, all those things, right? So when you have people saying, look, I want to provide for my family. I want to get out of debt. I want freedom, blah, blah, blah. Great. That's the reminder. All right. So are you willing, and you only need to take it one day at a time. You can only make the call you're about to make. Right. Are you tied very clearly to the outcome you want? And do you believe that this action of prospecting will get you there? And then everybody should have their own plan. Does that mean you're calling home search leads on the dialer? Are you calling expireds? Are you calling FSBOs? But I would encourage you to continue to encourage your team and remind them of, are you clear on why you want to do this? Because, hey, Mike, you've really been struggling this week getting your prospecting in. And I understand. Trust me, I've been there. There's a lot of reasons that might happen. What do you think the reason is? Right? And then let Mike tell you, oh, my wife got sick. Oh, hey, I totally understand it, But let me ask you this, would you agree with me that when we don't prospect, then our sales numbers are going to drop? Yeah, of course I agree with you. I agree with you. And then sometimes you just have to have the conversation for the 87th time. But it's just like you would do on a prospecting call, is pointing back to someone to their initial goal. Do you still want that? If you don't want it, I can't help you. You're not motivated. I'm not looking for that to be a client. So I would encourage a team leader or a brokerage owner or whatever to have conversations with their team members about why they would prospect in the first place, about the different ways they can prospect. Sometimes people just need a change of pace, right? So
that's a good point right there.
Well, I was going to ask you, if when you need a change of pace or your team does, what do you suggest they do? How do they change it up while still prospecting, but to change pace?
Well, okay. So for example, prospecting can be in many forms. I mean, how about you set a goal? You're going to do 10 pop buys, 10 past clients that you've done business with in the past. Stop by, drop something off for them that's not super expensive, something thoughtful, have a little bit of market update, and just initiate a conversation. Remind them of your referral program if you have one, or your raving fan club. But just go and talk to 10 people that you're already comfortable with because you've done business with them before. I mean, that's something that's measurable. That's something that if you did consistently, I guarantee you, you would get results. And that's a way of prospecting. So sometimes, some people are like, oh, I don't really want to call IDX leads or website leads or FSBOs. Well, you know what? Maybe take a breather from that and go try something different, right? So for me, I'm trying to find different ways to get my team to think about prospecting. And I think pop buys would be a great one. I think calling your sphere could be a really good one. If you're kind of down in the dumps, call somebody that you're more comfortable with to build that confidence. And then right after you've got that confidence call, then call the person that you're like, oh my God, I haven't talked to this person in 3 years. Do they hate me in the story you built in your head? And just call them and see what happens.
Yep. I think, again, the question you asked was, as a team leader, how would I coach or encourage you to help your team? Sometimes it's as simple as walking by and being like, hey man, I got a Starbucks gift card. Go take someone a coffee. Go take a solid prospect or a great past client. Like, I can tell you're dragging today. You're bummed out about prospecting. Who could you call that would meet you for coffee in the next 90 minutes, Or, hey, hammer the phones today, but right now call and set yourself up a Thursday coffee, and here it's on me. Or, pop buys. Or, hey, why don't you spend the next hour just calling past clients? Those are easy to call. Don't ask them for anything. Just check in, ask them what you can do for them. Tell them Merry Christmas. I guess the point we're getting to is there's so many different kinds of prospecting. Look, all of us are going to get bummed out if we're on the 364th day of the year of calling IDX leads, right? Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, because it'll still work. But the other thing you said that I thought was great, and I've got an answer for, but I'd love to hear yours, is you mentioned call someone that is easy to call that will build your confidence. In that thread right there, what do you recommend your team members do before they start prospecting to kind of get in the zone?
That's a good one. Number one, I think make sure that they've got their favorite drink set up. Make sure they're sort of comfortable. They got their chair, their distractions are done. That's the number one, is you got to get your mind right. So, a little mind training. I used to go and look myself in the mirror in the bathroom and just throw the water in my face and just get myself pumped up. And then as soon as I got to my desk, I just dial and I just go.
Yeah.
That worked for me. Now for other people might be different, but I think your mind right, and then smile before you dial. Always smile, because you can actually hear a smile. If you feel it through the phone, it's amazing what that does. But if you closed your eyes and you were talking to somebody and they were smiling when they were talking to you, you would know it. You could feel it. And so those are some of the exercises that we might focus on, is just getting your mind right, smiling, dialing, and then just push through that fear, that anxiety that you have. I always get anxious before I make calls, but I always push through it, and it makes a difference.
I mean, there's so many comments I could make, but to stay on this topic, I tell people, listen, what's your favorite song? What's the song that just gets you pumped, crank that bad boy. Go listen to a 3 or 4 or 5 minute song, get rocked. Listen, if calling your mom or your cousin Rick or your Uncle Mike, always makes you feel like $1 million, once a week or a couple times a month when you're really struggling, call that person, watch a hilarious YouTube video, watch a Jim Rohn video, or listen to some Jim Rohn audio that reminds you really quickly, you're going to experience the pain of discipline, either, whatever, making the call, the discipline, the pain of discipline weighs ounces, the pain of regret weighs tons. Right. So pick which pain you want to experience: regretting that you never made your calls and you didn't prospect, or the pain of discipline, which is like you said, I don't want to do it. I'm anxious, but I'm going to do it anyway. And then when you make that decision every single day, that starts to really add up. The Compound Effect is a great book. The Slight Edge is a really, really, really good book. But they say the same things. Just, you got to make the decision every day. Don't worry about the month. Don't worry about the year. Make the decision every day. When you're stuck in a rut, change it up. Prospect differently. Call a different lead type, or do some non-call prospecting. Do a hardcore day of all texting. Do some iPhone, cell phone videos and shoot videos. Do a day of all emails. Do some door knocking. Do some pop buys. Spend a day scheduling what we call a networking stack, where you go set up at a restaurant, you meet one person for lunch, and you schedule somebody for coffee after that and a coffee after that. You never leave, but you meet with 3 or 4 people back to back to back. Make sure they know that. Tip the heck out of the waitress or the waiter, so that now you kind of look like you run the place when they're like, oh, you're here to see Jason? Come on back. He's back here in the corner. There's all sorts of different things you can do. But even if it was the same thing every day, you anchor that to why you're doing it, what it's going to get you, and you remind yourself that people that are willing to do what they don't want to do tend to get what other people are never going to get. And there's 100 ways to say that, but it's still true.
Yep.
So
I think the moral of the story today is be very deliberate in what you want. Focus on one thing, maximum maybe 2 things, but really be laser focused in what you want out of 2019. If you're trying to create your plan, you want to execute, and maybe focus on quarterly goals versus annual goals, what you're trying to achieve. And just remember that it's one small bite at a time that'll get you there, not trying to eat a whole elephant at once. It's overwhelming. So that's sort of what I'm gathering right now.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's a great book recommendation. Just like if you want to grab a quick book and read it before the end of the year, that's a great one. 4 Disciplines of Execution. If you want to put the 12-week year next to it, or Gary Keller's book, The One Thing, those are good. But I would grab 4 Disciplines of Execution and put something in place to start in January. And like Jason said, just worry about that first 90 days. It doesn't need to be some glorious. I've learned my lesson the hard way on annual goals, where too many things have changed and it's only February. And I've already lost sight of how in the world are we going to get to that goal by December. So that can, as long as you're willing to adjust along the way, that's fine. But these quarterly goals are great. And that book does a really, really good job. Do you have an idea yet, Jason, of how you're going to implement 40X for 2019, or are you still working on it?
Yeah, no, I'm going to have a meeting on Thursday with my team, and we're going to focus on just collaboratively coming up with one initiative per department that we're going to focus on that are going to drive our metric. And I'm thinking that we want to focus on referrals. So we're probably going to set a referral goal that we want to achieve in 2019. And then we're going to basically create a plan where we really have like 1 or 2 things that we're focused on that, are going to drive that metric. And I think, Popeyes could be a really good one. I think a couple hours a week focused on maybe contacting 5 past clients, just simple things that are measurable that we can track on a weekly basis. I think if we did those things exceptionally well and just stayed focused on it, I think our team would definitely see the fruits of our labor for that. So that's probably where we're going to go, but I'm going to sort of feel out the group and try and get them to not obsess with the big goal once we set it, but more on the actionable stuff that we have influence over and can actually measure.
Yeah, man. If you think it would be valuable at all, I'm happy to pop on a video training with you or something on that with the whole crew or one of the departments. Just
that'd be great.
Either how we did that same thing or just some languaging or whatever. So, sure. All right, folks, hope this was valuable for you. We're all heading into 2019 together. Hopefully you had a chance to look back on 18. Hopefully it was an amazing year and we're talking about growing an even better year. But if it was a rough year, hey, wipe the slate clean. You can't go back. Get your head down, hustle, and let's turn into a really great 2019. Any final thoughts there, Jason?
Nope, that's it. Keep it simple, focus on one thing, and execute. That's it.
Awesome. Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy New Year. We may get one more in before the end of the year. If not, we'll talk to you soon in 2019.